And now a word from our sponsors. Tenebris Press is the home of new weird horror. Their latest release, One Hand to Hold, One Hand to Carve by M. Shaw, is a surreal body horror tale of two halves of a human cadaver who awaken in the morgue with no memory of their previous life as a single body, but with very different notions of what they want out of their new lease of life. For more information, visit www.tenebrispress.com.
Hey everybody, Tom Deedy here, Bram Stoker Award-winning author of Haven. Just like to invite everyone to come by and see me at the Ghoulish Book Festival in San Antonio, Texas on April 30th and May 1st. I will be sitting in on a couple panels, doing some readings, and it should be a great time. If you can't make it, check me out at tomdeedy.com. Thanks.
How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Oh shit, is that Bigfoot? No, it's a podcast called Ghoulish with me, Max Booth, an undead host, coming at you from a mic into your headsets, depending on how you're listening to this podcast. Hi, this is a podcast where I, Max Booth, talk to people about spooky things. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry, sometimes we do both. This is an unpredictable podcast. All types of emotions are expressed. On today's episode, I'm talking to Elford Alley about Bigfoot. That's right, folks. It is the Bigfoot episode. Kind of funny timing because the previous episode with Shane Hawk about strange encounters also mentioned Bigfoot. Is this Bigfoot week? Maybe. I mean, there's a Sherlock week. So how come there's not a Bigfoot week? Maybe there is. I haven't done any research into any of this. The good thing about hosting a podcast is I do not have to research anything. It's up to the guest to bring knowledge to me. If they are the ones spreading misinformation, that's on them, not me. Hello, my name is Joe Rogan. Hey, if you live in San Antonio, come on down at the end of this month, April 30th, to the Ghoulish Book Festival. Go on over to ghoulishbookfest.com to check out the details. It is a fest my partner Lily Michelle and I are throwing in downtown San Antonio. Big spooky book fest with tables selling books, panels, talking about various things, live readings, Mothman costume contest, and many other things. Come on down, check it out. I want to see you. Also, my new novel, Maggot Screaming, is out now. Go on over to ghoulishbooks.com to pick it up. Also, at that same website, check out Little High Titles below. John C. Foster's Leech, C.S. Humboldt's All These Subtle Deceits, and so many other books. We got books out the fucking kazoo. Is that the expression? I don't know. I feel like this isn't the only time I've gotten that wrong. But I'm not going to edit anything, so I will live with my mistake. Also, if you're someone who writes, good news. We just announced a new anthology project called Bound in Flesh. An anthology of trans body horror. So if you're a writer who identifies as trans or non-binary, come and write us a short story for Bound in Flesh. More details can be found at perpetualpublishing.com. Go to that website, click on the news tab. You should see it on that page that you get redirected to. On May 13th in Houston, Texas, I will be hosting a Frank Henenluttel double feature of Basket Case and Brain Damage at the Alamo Drafthouse in Katy, Texas. I will also be doing a reading for my new book, Maggot Screaming. I will have copies for sale. I will sign them for you. If you live in Houston or Katy, or maybe Houston and Katy are the same thing, I'm not positive. If you live in that area, come on down. Go over to the Alamo Drafthouse website and look up May 13th. And buy your ticket now before it sells out. I am so excited for that. All right. That's all I got. All the fucking advertisement I'm going to do. Now let's get on to the reason you downloaded this podcast. You want to hear two dudes talking about Bigfoot? I'm going to give you two dudes talking about Bigfoot. I saw on your website you were listed as a disgraced paranormal investigator. How were you disgraced? Please tell me this story.
I put that on there to be funny, but also because, I used to do the whole ghost hunting thing and, go to houses with groups of people. And it just got to where I became like the skeptic, like the debunker person. And I stopped getting invited to those things because it'd be stuff like, we took a picture and there's these orbs. It's like, that's dust reflecting the flash from the camera.
Yeah.
and so then I kind of put it as a joke. Like, I am a bit disgraced on that.
It sounds like you will disgrace. You will exiled from the community. And shame.
They don't need people like me pointing out flash reflecting off of dust mites in the air. Like,
yeah, how dare you go and point out just basic logic?
I know. I'm a real son of a bitch that way.
How did you get started in like that community? Like, what brought you to that?
Well, I think growing up, it was like growing up, I'd always hear stories from my grandmother about like, ghost stories from our family and things like that, or experiences people had. So growing up, it was always taught, ghosts are real. These things actually exist. And so then when people started doing the ghost hunting thing took off, I thought, oh, that sounds fun. Like, go with these groups to places like that. And, so it's just kind of seamless. Like growing up, I was always taught those things were real.
When did you begin like going out and investigating with people?
Probably like middle school, high school. Like,
oh wow.
If I went on vacation with my parents, like we would find like, well, what hotel's haunted? Let's stay there.
Yeah.
And let's walk around and see stuff. And then there was a house that some family members lived in that was abandoned, and they had all these stories. Different people lived there of hauntings and things they experienced. So I like to go out there and see if I could see anything or get pictures of anything. And I never did, but there was like a feeling in the air. It's like you could go out there sometimes. It was an old house. You go out there sometimes and you felt uneasy. It was just odd. Like I never quite understood why that was.
It's like, what is that feeling? Oh, this house is really old. It's the mold.
That's probably it. It's probably
poisoning my brain. It's that gas leak.
This is very bad for me to be out here.
I used to live in a house with mold and it didn't feel great. And when we moved out, it was like, oh, so this is what life is supposed to feel like.
I had that same experience. I had a rent house in a little Texas town, and there was like all these water leak problems, and we found mold. But the whole time before we found mold that I lived there, I was just sick constantly. And it was like we left, and all of a sudden it's like, I can breathe.
Yeah, it's almost like mold is not good for humans. I don't know.
Yeah, like inhaling it, day in and day out.
Just licking it. Yeah. Do you live in Texas now, or did you move out?
I moved. We live in Oklahoma now.
Okay, so it's like Texas 2, basically, right?
From what I
understand. Okay,
everybody likes to act like it's that different. It's really just an extension of North Texas.
Yeah,
it goes up to Kansas.
It's just one big patch of land. Where did you grow up in Texas?
I grew up in there's a town called Desert, and just middle of nowhere. Like it was a street, and there was our house and a grandparents' house and an uncle's house, and that was the town of Desert.
If I was editing a book and they said, "Oh yeah, my book takes place in Desert, Texas," I would be like, "That's a bit on the nose. you,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't name a town that."
And it was well originally it was named after Civil War deserters. So, but I don't know. Instead of deserter Texas, they called it Desert Texas. But it was
Okay.
people hid out there that didn't want to fight in the war, and then after that, after the war, really horrible racist Confederate people use that area as their
Yeah.
hideout and their place operations. And like, I mean, I did find a Confederate coin in the driveway once, like got
Yeah.
washed after a big rain. So it's interesting.
Huh. I'm gonna have to look this town up. It sounds interesting. What an odd and fun name. I like the name. Okay. So when did you get introduced to Bigfoot, which is the topic of the episode?
Oh, Bigfoot. That would be, like we're that generation that grew up with unsolved mysteries. So that was like the
Hmm.
first introduction to that. And then I remember getting this book when I was like pretty young. It was called The Field Guide to North American Monsters. And then as I started talking, I would talk to people like, oh yeah, well, those things are real. Oh yeah, I've seen one. Or, I'd hear these stories and it just got me obsessed with it.
So let's crack some mysteries right now about Bigfoot that people want to know. Mostly when I say people, I mean me. When is it just one? Is it also many Bigfoot or big feet? What's the proper terminology?
I don't know. I don't know what the proper, I would
Bigfoots?
go with big feet because there's
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, that's what most people are like, oh, there's a bunch of them. Like they're all across the country. And
Yeah.
which is like, which is also, skeptics would very rightly be like, well, how are they so hidden if there has to be a minimum of like, I mean, to have a breeding population of anything, you're looking at 800 to 2,000 animals. And
Yeah.
now you're looking at 800, 2,000 animals that are like 8 feet tall and weigh as much as a small car. It's like, how are they hidden?
Has anyone settled on like what a group of big feet is called? Like a
I don't think so.
pack?
A track would be nice. I think that's what it should be called.
A track? A
Yeah.
track is nice. Yeah, I
Yeah.
said pack as an example, but track, that's a great name. I like that.
Yeah.
A track of big feet. That's perfect.
Yeah. There
Episode
we go.
done. I mean, we're not going to top
We,
this.
yeah. No, we'll spread the word. Like people
So
need to know.
if you had to describe what Bigfoot is to someone who's never even heard anyone else mention this creature, this species, what would you say to them?
Um, Based on what, people have claimed to seen, just a really tall, upright walking ape. But the one detail, and when people always draw it, they draw it very much like a gorilla, kind of. But whenever I've talked to people that have claimed to have seen one, they always say it's eerily human. Like its face doesn't really make them think of an ape. It makes them think of like this is something very human.
Okay.
And it's almost what freaks them out the most. It's like when they see it, they're like, oh my god, this giant ape thing, and then they look at it and like, oh, that looks uncomfortably like us.
So you've spoken to people who have claimed to have seen a Bigfoot.
Yeah, yeah.
And how did just like are you just involved in Bigfoot communities or
Not really. That's
how
what's
is this
funny. It's like
happening?
I think it's because people kind of know that I'm interested in them, and I think they know that I talk to people that are interested in the unknown and stuff, and I don't make fun of anybody. So
Hmm.
people are just kind of like, oh, well, let me tell you about what I saw. Let me tell you about this thing. And I actually, in the town I moved into, I went and visited somebody's land because they were like, oh, we have them on our land, like we hear them at night.
What do they
So I
sound
went out there.
like?
They say you hear like these grunts, hoots, hollers. It almost sounds like if you were at an ape exhibit at a zoo, like what you hear chimpanzees, and they hear it in the woods or claim to. And they said you can hear crashing around. It sounds like a really big animal. And the place I went, they've been for years. They want to get a picture. They've been obsessed with getting a picture, and they never
Yeah.
have. And so I went out there and walked around, and they were telling me stories of like they're like you get up. It's when you get up early in the morning, you hear them. You'll hear them at 4 a.m. is what they always say.
Okay.
And the other person I talked to said they lived out in the middle of nowhere and they came home and they pulled into their driveway, and when their headlights hit their house, you're just standing on their porch, and then
Just
it like
hanging
bolted
out.
off.
Yeah.
And it just scared. That's what they described as like scared the absolute hell out of them. It was not like a fun like,
Yeah.
oh, I saw Bigfoot. It was like, well, I sleep with a gun by my bed in case it comes back.
What about the people who claim that they can listen in on this Bigfoot every morning? Like, are they afraid or are they just like impressed? Like, I feel like I would be happy. Like, this is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
they were happy about it. Like
Yeah.
the husband of the couple, he gets up really early on purpose just to see if he can hear them. And
Mhm.
he's tried the camera traps and he wants to take pictures. The wife is her family's Native American, and so she told her grandmother about it. And the grandma was like, "Oh, those are just the Watchers. Like you leave them alone, they leave you alone." And I'd never heard
Okay.
that them be described like that, like the Watchers. Like they live in
Yeah.
the forest. There's something else. Like you leave them alone, they leave you alone.
They just
And so they're very
watch.
much the only concern they have is they have some grandkids. And because I was talking to them and they're kind of whispering to me, they're like, we don't want them to find out because we're afraid they'll be scared to come over to grandma's house. There's monsters in the woods.
Now, is Bigfoot or the big feet, are they considered carnivorous? Do they eat meat? What's up with the diet?
I, all those stories you'll read is carnivorous.
Okay.
Because there's stories about them killing deer. The oldest legends, like some people have described them as like cannibals, that they eat people, steer clear of them.
Yeah.
Where they are, kids will vanish, things like that. Some of the oldest stories describe them like a carnivorous monster.
And how old do those stories go back?
As long as there's been people in North America, there's been stories. Like there's a book. It's called Gods, Cannibals, and Monster Men. And I'm blanking on the author, and I feel so bad about that. But she collected like some of the oldest stories from various Native American tribes that dealt with something like Bigfoot. And there's even petroglyphs of different animals and people, but they'll show like one thing that looks like a person that's way taller than everybody else. And so people have always thought like those come from areas where the stories are told.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. What do you think about Bigfoot? You think he's real?
I stick with the X-Files line. Like I want to believe.
Yeah.
Like I want so bad because anytime I hear people talk about what they've experienced, like I'm in. I'm like, yes, they're real. But then like the skeptic part of my brain is like, well, a whole group of 6 to 8 foot tall, massive animals. Like, what are they eating? Where are they living? How are they existing without us finding them? Like even something smart and hiding from us on purpose. It's how for 50 years of people actively looking.
Well, I mean, how do we know like they haven't just become more civilized too? I mean, there's lots of humans that tall. Like who's to say they haven't just shaved and put clothes on?
That's why like at some point they're like, this isn't working. When we're looking at these people living in towns, this looks way nicer. Like
let's get a job.
Yeah.
I mean,
then they met capitalism. They're like, we made a mistake.
Let's go back.
We should return.
They try to go back to the woods.
You can't go to the doctor.
What did they do before then? Just fucking. I guess they just died.
Yeah.
I don't know how intelligent all big feet supposed to be.
See, I don't know. Like, if some people describe them as like they think they're very smart or that they're almost human level intelligence, and other people are like, well, obviously they're just an animal. They're just a big animal. Like, maybe something on par with a chimp, which is still pretty smart.
Yeah. But they most likely are not speaking like English, right?
Yeah, like there's recordings make where they've claimed to have recorded them talking, and it kind of ranges. It'll be a recording that sounds like a big howl, or a recording sounds like gibberish, like weird gibberish, and that'll be like, well, this is clearly a Bigfoot.
Have you thought much about what you would do if you encountered one in the wild, like just you and a Bigfoot? What happens then?
And I don't know. Like I've always wanted to see something like that.
Yeah.
It's like I would think I would just like try to take in the moment, because anyone that's seen one usually describes like it bolts pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like you don't really get a long time with one. Maybe try to sneak a picture with my phone, but never show it to anybody, because I feel like there's nobody who's ever taken a picture of Bigfoot and like didn't regret telling the world.
Yeah, their lives take a sharp decline pretty much immediately, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't end well. Like I would just not tell a soul. I would tell you. I think I would send you a message, be like, Max,
we gotta do a follow-up podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I think I would cry. I think I would be skilled and just cry and run away.
I mean, that's why like a lot of people describe that. Like,
yeah,
it's like a moment of like, what is this? And as it kind of settles in their head what they're seeing, it's like this fear of like, oh, I should just get away from this as quickly as I possibly can.
Right. I mean, I'm the same way with any wild animal I come across, because what am I gonna do? I can't. Yeah. Am I gonna fight an animal? I'm not gonna do that. I would lose. So, I mean, have you ever encountered anything like dangerous and wild, like outside? And what did you do? A stray dog, maybe?
When I was really young, I mean, we lived in the middle of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
So there was a couple times, playing in the woods with my friends. If it was early morning, you'd see, coyotes nearby and you can watch them run. Or, one time I saw a bobcat really close up, and
Yeah.
I just kind of like froze and watched it. There was a mountain lion in our property for a while. It ate all my dad's chickens, and
No.
I never saw it. I took my mom and sister saw it take a chicken in the middle of the day, and they were
Wow.
just like, it was the most amazing thing. Like, and my dad was like, well, we better kill it, and my mom was like, no way, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Don't you touch it.
That chicken didn't think so. The chicken was like, "What the fuck, guys? I'm
Yeah,
getting
seriously.
killed."
Well, and my sister's rabbit, like she had a rabbit, and it pulled it through the bars of the cage, and that was a
Wow.
grisly sight to find the next morning.
Oh
It's
no.
like, oh, Emily, I'm so sorry about your rabbit.
If what do you think would happen if like society at large like discovered evidence of big feet and like embrace them and like big feet will suddenly like on the news and shit? Like what would change?
I don't know. I don't know if there would be a big influx of now people like they want to capture one, they want to hunt one, or could it become the face of climate change? Kind of like hey, we just discovered this amazing thing. If we don't make big changes, it's gone. Like,
Do you
um,
think they would have them in zoos?
I don't know because I mean, there's people that debate whether it's okay to have a chimpanzee in a zoo because they're intelligent and they're unhappy in zoos, and so it's like then you have something that's even closer to human. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if
And
you could.
it's been so long since we have been adding those animals to zoos. But it's interesting to think if we discovered a new species, like how, and something like a Bigfoot, like what society would do, like what would those conversations be like? I don't think a zoo would happen. I think there would be too many protests. I
Yeah,
don't
and I
know.
also don't know. I don't know how you capture one if they existed, if they were real, and they're so good at hiding that
Yeah,
if they're real, like that's what I always thought. I always thought the funny scenario would be if they found one, like, and they got
yeah,
good footage of it, and it was like, okay, they're real, and then after that, nothing else. Like
yeah.
5 years go by, 10 years go by, and it's kind of realizing, like, man, those things are really good at hiding from us. Like, I think it'd be an unsettling impact on like national parks and things like that. Like, oh, those
Right.
things can hide really well. They can be anywhere.
Yeah. I guess like I think about how we're constantly knocking down like every tree in the country. And,
Yeah,
sooner or later they won't have a place to hide.
yeah. Like if they're real, and that's almost one of the biggest things for me that maybe that they're probably not is the fact that with all the development we've done, all the
Yeah.
knocking down trees, like nothing.
Have you read much Bigfoot fiction?
Yeah, I've read because I think he makes a very good horror figure. Like,
Yeah.
and um like I read Holly Ray Garcia's The Easton Falls Bigfoot Massacre.
Okay.
And that was a
How
good one because it really did the whole like if they were real and if they were suddenly pissed off at a group of humans in a small scenario, you're just kind of screwed.
yeah.
And it was very like I was reading, I was like, oh, I've been waiting for a book kind of like this. And then there was paperbacks from Hell put out that they did the Spirit, and it was one where it kind of did where they're on the way to extinction, so now they're really inbred and their
Yeah.
genetics are all messed up. So the ones that are left are these really creepy, murderous creatures. Like we pushed them to the brink, and now that's
Right.
what's left of them.
Those sound pretty good. What about movies? I don't think I've seen a Bigfoot movie that wasn't like a comedy.
Yeah, that's what's so funny is to me, like it makes so much sense that they would be a great horror movie figure, but the
Yeah.
horror movies with them just don't. I don't know if it's the second you see him in the suit, just it kills it. Like because one of the ones I think was the best was Willow Creek, and it was a found footage horror movie, and it was
Okay.
really unsettling because they just don't show you. Like you don't see it. Like it's there, and you see the impact of what it's doing, but they just keep him to the shadows, and it's the most effective one I've ever seen.
Probably the best way to do a Bigfoot movie is to show it like the least amount of him as possible.
Yeah, because there's just something about as soon as he walks out into the light, it's this big, tall, hairy ape person. It just, I don't know why, it just instantly does not seem intimidating on
Right.
film.
Yeah. I'm sure it would be different, like face to face in real life, just because you're not used to seeing something like that in real life, but you all used to seeing like shitty costumes in movies.
Yeah,
I always love like I can't think of any examples, but I know I've seen movies or TV shows where like someone is dressed as a Bigfoot, then they get shot because Some hunter believes, oh, it's the real Bigfoot, but no, it's just a dude in a costume. I think there was a Simpsons episode about Bigfoot too, but I'm drawing a blank on what happens in it.
It was they went out camping and Homer ended up getting stung by all these bees and covered in mud. So he walks out and he's and everybody thinks he's Bigfoot.
Because he's trying to eat the fucking honey out of the comb and all the bees sting its tongue. That's a great episode. I love that. And meanwhile, like Milge is like watching all this stuff on the news. I don't know. It's like in season 1 or season 2. It's a great episode.
Yeah, I swear it's season 1, maybe.
That sounds right. It's been a minute. Yeah. Do you write much Bigfoot fiction?
I wrote a novella, like kind of like a comedy drama novella about a guy who spent his entire life searching, and now he's an old man. He has a cancer diagnosis, and he's like looking at his legacy and what his obsession cost him. It's kind of like he's going one last trip. He's like, this is my last opportunity to make up for everything I've lost.
Yeah.
And then I did one horror short story, but I have like some notes of what I want to do, because I do want to do a big horror one, because I think it'd be great. But it's funny, for something that I'm obsessed with, I haven't written as much about it as you would think I would have.
Maybe it's just, maybe you'll like not afraid, but like nervous about not doing it justice, since you do feel so much about that. Like I have that with certain topics. I'm really passionate about it, but I'm hesitant to just write a lot about it, because what if I'm wasting like time and energy into something with that theme that I haven't even conceived of yet? So maybe it's something like that. I don't know.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. It's almost like, well, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it right. And then I just psych myself out.
Well, I mean, I would be excited to read more Bigfoot fiction. I think folks listening would too. Bigfoot is a fun topic.
Yeah. And, Hunter Shea, he's done a few. He did one. His most recent one, I think, was Bigfoot in Brooklyn. And so he has a few Bigfoot horror out there.
Bigfoot in Space would be a good book.
Oh, that would.
It would be. I don't know what would happen, but that would be a fun title. It'd be a fun front cover too. Yeah. And plus, I haven't looked too much into it, but didn't they just announce a Amityville movie in space?
Yes.
How?
I just seen that picture of the house floating in space. It's
I thought it was like a joke image, but evidently it's a real movie poster for a movie that's made.
I know. I'm gonna watch it. I hope it's one of those that they really tried hard. I feel like the best bad movies where everyone tried so hard and it just didn't work. That's when it's fun to watch.
How does the house get in space?
I don't know. Like,
is it like
intact? I don't know.
What's that animated movie Up? Will they take the balloons and they attach it to the house? Maybe something like that. I don't know. What other like stories and legends about Bigfoot like do you like to tell people about when discussing this topic?
One thing I always like is reading stories about where people had these face-to-face encounters that were kind of scary. Like I've always enjoyed those. Like now I live in Oklahoma. There's a town that has a Bigfoot festival every year, Honobia, and they have it because of a thing called the Siege of Honobia, which was like in the late '90s, where some people built a house in the middle of nowhere, and they just started getting rocks thrown at their house and their animals disappearing. And then they started seeing these big things walking around, just like at the edge of where their porch light would go. And they got to where the things were staring in the window, trying to open the doors. And it became like they abandoned their house and they tried to get cops to come out. They just tried to get anyone they could to listen to them. And that was an interesting one where it's like this big story. Or
what happens at this fest?
Oh, it's like, they'll have like all the cheesy, Bigfoot themed food. They'll have all the food trucks out. Then they'll get people that are researchers and things to come out and they'll tell their stories. And there's another place in Oklahoma called Area X, where it's a group of people have been doing this continuous study where they work in 3 to 6 month shifts, where they go out to this middle of nowhere land and they just stay there constantly trying to get any evidence they can of Bigfoot.
Why this one specific spot?
Because it was some guy owned a ton of land out there and he had problems with, it was almost like the Siege of Zenobia. He had problems with things happening to his animals. And he eventually told some people when it got to these researchers and they more or less were like, we'll buy it from you. So they have this huge tract of land that they visit. And it was featured, there's a documentary by Small Town Monsters, and they'll take like these little flaps of sightings and do a documentary about it. And they did one that featured Area X, and they'll talk about, stuff like Boggy Creek or the Momo sightings, like where, a small town had these things happen.
Yeah, man, I love small towns. I love all of this stuff, like just how every small town like has like a story like this. It's just so fun. Like cities don't have that.
Yeah, they all have a monster. They all have a period, usually in the 70s, where everyone went crazy and thought, there's UFO land in the town or things like that. I love that stuff too.
You don't have that too much now, I guess. I don't know why. I guess because of like the internet, and people just don't really socialize as much as they used to. You know what I mean? Like there's no like an example that I'm trying to say is like 2 weeks ago, there's this guy who lives in my street who is a nut job, and he's like the neighborhood nut job, and his shed exploded the other day. Just like lots of fire trucks, flames and smoke all over the place. And everybody in the sub, what the fuck is that called? Just the subdivision. We all gathered around on the sidewalk and we were watching. And I felt like this is the only time this subdivision has ever gathered as one, at least in my experience. And that must have been happening all the time back in the day. Fucking UFOs coming down. Everyone's watching this. But now what do we have? TikTok, Nextdoor, where we just talk about like, oh, watch out. I saw a black guy walk by.
Oh yeah, Nextdoor is a nightmare.
It is.
When I first moved into this house, somebody put a letter in my mailbox. It was like, we're inviting you to join Nextdoor. It was like somebody down the street. And I don't know why that unsettled me. like a physical mailer to join a Facebook group. That just creeped me the hell out.
It's pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I think back in the day, I feel like you could have these things that became, legendary because it was you didn't have the internet to get the answers right away. So you had time for a rumor mill to start. And also a lot of times it would be because the Associated Press would pick up a story. Like there'd be a slow news day and somehow they get a hold of, this one town, somebody said they saw a Bigfoot, and then they would share that nationwide, and it would just become the thing everybody talked about for a little bit.
And plus, like, you have to think, if someone makes a post on Facebook or something, that post stays and people can keep reading that specific post. But before social media, it was basically playing a game of telephone, right? So the story would continuously change, and people would get different type of rumors, and they would add their own like spin on that rumor. But you can't really do that too much with social media because that text stays there, and you can always reference it.
Yeah, there's actually, I'm reading John Darnielle's Devil House right now.
I have that too.
Like, and he does that with like talking about, when a crime would happen like in the 80s, 70s, and it would take on a life of its own. And then it would have, especially in the Satanic Panic, when cops would just as easily buy into the crazy rumors.
Yeah.
And so then it's like you have to parse out, well, what really happened? Like,
it's really interesting. I love talking about this stuff. Any other things concerning Bigfoot that you wanted to bring up?
One thing I've always had I've always wondered if this is happening, and I would love confirmation of it. I'd love to figure out somehow. But if you're ever watching those Bigfoot shows where people look for Bigfoot, they go into the woods and they're looking for, wood knocking, because they say they hit stuff on trees to communicate, and they're looking for these specific sounds and stuff like that. And I've always wondered if all these Bigfoot people are going to the same areas of woods to do this, how often are they not ever encountering anything but themselves?
Yeah.
Like they're each taking home recordings of themselves as more evidence that there's something in this area. It's creating a cycle.
Yeah, those footprints just belong to the guy who passed like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is a little similar, but not so much, but I'll bring it up. Do you know what the Salton Sea is?
Yes.
Yeah. So we published a book about the Salton Sea last year. Michael Paul Gonzalez. Michael Paul Gonzalez. Sometimes I get Michael Paul and Paul Michael confused because I published someone named Paul Michael Anderson. So I have the three names confused. His name is Michael Paul Gonzalez. And he went out to the Salton Sea to shoot some footage to make a book trailer. And all I could imagine is, because there's so many videos on YouTube of people shooting footage at the Salton Sea, I'm just amazed that those videos will just not filming, a dozen other people also filming. It's like, how do they find the empty space? Because it's nothing but people shooting footage downhill. So like how with these big feet explodes, like how are they just not constantly running into each other? Like that would be like a funny type of movie, I think. Like people keep like accidentally adding evidence that a Bigfoot is real just from like going through the land. Like someone eating like a fucking Snickles and they throw the wrapper on the ground and someone behind them is like, oh, I guess Bigfoot likes Snickles, huh? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, that would be, especially if you have like maybe one group, see somebody and they think it's a Bigfoot and they're like, screw it, I'm going to prove it exists right now and shoot somebody. Then you have a murder mystery and people trying to hide a body while other people are combing the woods looking for a monster.
Yeah. It would
great
be
comedy of errors.
It'd be fun. It'd be really funny. All right. Well, I think maybe we covered everything. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon that's like, you have to talk about this when you bring up Bigfoot?
I don't think so. Like I told you earlier I was bad at blanking, so like I had my beautiful mind style, like
okay.
In case I blank on something, it's like
anything on that list that we haven't talked about.
Oh, not really. Like I wrote down, different books. One I forgot to mention was, I mentioned Hunter Shea and Holly Ray Garcia, but L.J. Doherty did one called The Beast Caliber Lodge, which is his like, Nazi hunting book, but also there's Bigfoot. And that's just a great sell. It's like,
is Bigfoot like
people shooting Nazis? So.
Is Bigfoot a Nazi in the book?
No, I think it's. I believe it's. I haven't read it yet. It's on my Kindle. I haven't started it yet, but I believe it's these people are like hunting Nazis hiding out in this lodge. It just so happens there's a Bigfoot there. It's going to complicate things.
Is Bigfoot political, and where does Bigfoot stand?
I would think Bigfoot would be. Gosh, I don't know what he would be, because I feel like he would be on the preserved nature side. But he also seems like one of those weird individualistic people who happen to just vote however a billionaire tells them so they can stick it to the liberals. So.
But also we're talking about Bigfoot as if it's just one thing, and there's many big feet, right?
Yeah,
potentially. And I mean they could be divided. We don't know. There could be
that's true.
There could be a right wing Bigfoot and a left wing Bigfoot, all on like the same area of land. They could be enemies. I don't know.
Yeah,
because like if there's just one Bigfoot, then that implies what? It lives like it doesn't die.
Yeah, like it'd be immortal. It'd be immortal, and it would be like walking all over the country, because I think there's only 2 states without Bigfoot sightings, so he's just constantly on the move.
What states don't have them? Do you know of?
Rhode Island and Hawaii.
That checks out. So yeah, Alaska makes sense. Snow Sasquatch. That's also Bigfoot, right? Or is that something separate?
Oh no, it's the same name. It's like there's a million different names, and so everyone has their own, like they'll call it like the wild man or the creature of this, wherever the location is.
What about a Yeti? Is that also just like a snow Bigfoot, or is that something else?
Basically a snow Bigfoot. They describe a big upright ape covered in white hair. Kill a yak by punching it in the head.
Jesus Christ. Okay. It's pretty hell to kill.
There's a famous mountain climber. Reinhold Messner wrote a book about, because he claimed to have seen one in the 80s, and he wrote a book about his encounter. But he came around to, he thinks it's just a bear. It's very rare and hard to see. It can walk upright longer than people think it can.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. Do you still anything like not even Bigfoot related that would seem like most people don't believe in, but there's a small community of people who do believe in it that you also strictly believe is true? Like, is there anything like you will just like ride or die that happened? That's real.
I've always I'm one of the few people that I think the Patterson Gimlin film, that of the Bigfoot walking, and he does what he turns to the camera, and that silhouette that's on every shirt.
Yeah.
I think those guys really thought, and they really have filmed one. And my basis for that has always been that, their lives went to shit after they filmed it. And the 2 guys became estranged. And then one of them was on his deathbed with cancer. Roger Patterson was dying. And he invited the other guy who filmed it, Bob Gimlin, to come see him.
Okay.
And in front of all these people, his dying words were, you got to prove it's real. You got to show that we saw something. Like, you got to, like, his dying words were like, you basically avenge me.
So I
Show
don't
the
know.
world it's real.
I don't know anything about the history of that video. So anything else you can tell me about that? I would love to hear about it. Like it was just two guys who did it. They were just out in the woods.
Yeah.
What was going on? What's the context?
Okay, so the context is so Roger Patterson, he was like he worked at rodeos and he did, he worked on ranches and things like that. And he became obsessed with stories of Bigfoot and he wanted to do a documentary. He wanted to go out in the middle of nowhere and find one. And he got Bob Gimlin, who was just a well-known tracker and hunter and upstanding guy, to go with him.
So they were going out specifically to find a Bigfoot.
Yeah. And that's also one of the big,
okay.
Yeah. So it's another thing when, skeptics point out, it's like, well, they went out there to find one and they found one. What are the odds? That's a big evidence for most people for it being fake, which fair. So basically they went out there and Bob Gillen kind of eye-rollingly like, okay, sure, we'll go look for Bigfoot. So they go out to this area. All of a sudden their horses are freaking out. One of them gets thrown from a horse and they look up and there's the thing from the video, like kind of walking across a creek bed. And so they get their camera out. They film like a few seconds of it just walking off into the trees. And then after that, it's a big, like it's been broken down by different people. Astonishing Legends did that podcast did a really deep breakdown of like his attempts to sell the film, prove it was real, get anything out of it. And none of it worked. Neither of them got anything out of it.
What was the podcast? Astonishing Legends?
Astonishing Legends.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll check that out. That sounds cool. When did they do this? Like what time?
1967.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. It's been a while.
Yeah, it was that that's always hit me was the deathbed thing because that shortly after, it was just a few years after they took the video that Roger Patterson died, and him like telling Bob Gillen like basically avenge me, like show people it's real, like they don't believe us, and I think they both walked out of there thinking they had the proof. They're like, we got the proof, and it's like until you have a body, you don't have the proof.
Yeah, that's so depressing, man. Just like to put yourself in like the position to think about what they must have been talking about as they left those woods. Like all lives were gonna change. We're all gonna be famous. We fucking did it, and then no one believes them, and they just die being called a fraud.
And that's a lot of how it goes for a lot of the people who are the hardcore believers. They're so sure, especially like if you watch any like the old school documentaries about Bigfoot made in like the 70s, stuff like that. And when they talk to researchers, they're like, any day now, we are going to prove it. Any day now, we're going to show that we were right. And clearly that hasn't happened.
Not yet. It could still happen. I'm not like there's no Bigfoot. I'm not in that position. I'm just in the position where I've never really thought about it.
Yeah.
Until this podcast.
Yeah. Like I've just always been obsessed with it, and I would so like it to be real.
It's also a helmless thing to believe as well. Like those other things like, oh no, if you continue down this lifestyle, your kids will die because they will not be like given the right vitamins and they haven't seen the sun in 20 years. But this is a fun activity, I feel like. It's something you could do with your family, like go out and camp in the woods and hunt for a Bigfoot. That sounds fine. I mean, you're not hurting anybody.
Yeah, it's like a harmless belief. Someone who doesn't believe in vaccines, not a harmless belief.
Yeah,
but like
exactly.
mine's like no one gets hurt by me thinking, what if there are giant ape men in the woods? Like I'm not hurting anybody.
Yeah, I also kind of feel that the same way with the people who believe like the earth is flat. Like, all right, so you believe that. What are you doing differently? Yeah, I mean, maybe they do have some crazy shit they do. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. Maybe flat earthers will like, well, I gotta kill homeless people now because the earth is flat. I don't know exactly what they do, so I'm mostly speaking out of my ass with that one.
Yeah, most of what I see on at least like YouTube or social media is the times that flat earthers try to prove the earth is flat, end up proving it's round, and like I'm gonna get in this rocket and go up and I'm gonna be able to see. And it's like, oh wow, all I saw was the curvature of the earth. So
I always love that one comment, and maybe this was like a photoshopped comment. I hope not, but it was from a flat earther who said something like, people all around the planet believe that the
and then like the comment was like, repeat that back to yourself slowly.
I hope that's real. Just like I hope Bigfoot is real. Let's I don't know, maybe if this podcast becomes big enough and popular, we will do like a Bigfoot retreat and we will all go commit suicide in the woods. How can people find you online?
Oh, how do people find me online?
Yeah, let's just transition straight into that after that comment.
Like, we should kill ourselves in the woods. Now, how do people find you? If I'm going to go out, I'm going to kill you people talking. You can find me on Twitter at Elford Alley. And that's where I'm the most active, honestly. And I have a website, and I'm trying to do more with it. But at the moment, it's really just kind of like I'll update about that I did this. And I have a link.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This was a ton of fun. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Can't believe we've gone so long without doing a Bigfoot episode.
I know. Like,
but I'm glad.
What other cryptids are you missing?
All of them. I'm going to do a Mothman one soon because we have that Mothman book coming out. But
I can't
like
wait to read that. I love Mothman.
Me too. Like someone suggested a while back doing an episode on just cryptids. But I think it's more fun to do them separately like this. Like we just did a whole episode on just Bigfoot. And that's fun to go in, like do a deep dive on just one at a time. So eventually we will get through them all, I imagine. Unless I stop doing the podcast.
And thank you to our sponsors, Tom Deedy, author of Haven and the Clearing, Tenebris Press, an independent publisher of new weird horror from diverse and unsung voices around the world, Bucket of Blood Books and Records, Chicago's premier destination for new and used horror books and movies, Witty Books, an independent bookstore in Tulsa, Oklahoma, specializing in speculative fiction, small press titles, all things spooky. Find them online at wittybooks.com. My Horror Confessional, a horror movie podcast, Nightworms, a horror subscription service, Horror DNA, a horror website, Vic Carey, author of Thorazine Dreams, and Nightfire, publisher of books for the dead, the living, and everyone in between. Nightfire is the new horror imprint from the folks at Tor Books.
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max.